What's happening, everyone? So today is one of those rare times when I will be the only voice that you hear today. This weekend, I got the opportunity to go to Dream Machines in tropical, sunny Half Moon Bay. It's a car show, plane show, machine show, and so it was at the Half Moon Bay Airport with a couple of good pals. You might say it could be kind of a preview for a few of the upcoming Cars and Characters episodes. So I want to go and take you through a couple of the notable items that I saw there. So get ready. You might learn something. Oh yeah, these... I really wish I knew more about these. These are this is a 1971 Skyline GTX. It's a Nissan, and this one's got the V6 in it, or I'm sorry, the straight six. I believe it had, I want to say 130 horsepower as opposed to about 105 in the four-cylinder. But this is the third generation. This is where they really started to get some performance going, and they started to turn these into, well, they kind of started to get a reputation as a bit of a hot rodder car, a Japanese hot rodder car, maybe a Japanese muscle car, if you will. And contrary to what you might see on Gran Turismo, the majority of these older ones, they didn't have all-wheel drive back then. So, well, they didn't come with all-wheel drive back then. But this one, I mean... These cars are rare to see at all, let alone here in the United States. Obviously, it's a right-hand drive car, so this obviously had to get imported here, and I can guarantee that wasn't cheap. So this truck is a Datsun. It's got a 1200cc engine in it. It belongs to a buddy of mine named Alex. Shout out, Alex. So obviously, another right-hand drive car. Truck, I'm sorry. But actually, this particular, you see right there. Let me rewind that just a little bit. So right here, you'll notice that this is not your typical truck. It's more like like an El Camino or like a Ranchero. And in that it does not have a removable bed. So it's all one piece, and in the United States, here we'll keep this going. But in the United States, there's certain laws around being able to import a truck that doesn't have a removable bed because they are considered a commercial vehicle. So, obviously this guy had to go through some hoops. These people with these cars, it's not just about buying the car; it's about importing it, bringing it back. You probably saw on the episode we did with Nikolai and his brother with that Mustang, but it's not just the price of the car, it's bringing it here. And you think tariffs are bad. I mean, well, they are. But, trying to get one of these in is next to impossible. You really have to be an enthusiast to get these. It's such an ordeal.
I had a buddy who was 6'7".
Who's that guy?
God, it actually is not that small.
Really. Yeah, they really are not that small inside. They do seem like it though. They seem like they're like a death trap. Because if you're sitting in that truck and you look out the windshield, it's 2 feet in front of you, maybe 2.5 feet in front of you where that hood ends. And so it feels like cars are really close to you, and they kind of are, but you're just a tiny truck. So this is the 1200cc motor, and it's got the 40 barrel or the 240 barrel carburetors there. This is a torquey little motor. And this doesn't weigh barely anything. So you get kind of blown around on the freeway. But these trucks are very rare, and it's interesting to see. You never see them in the States. They don't need a whole lot of power. which is good because they don't have it. Look at that tiny little radiator, man. And you said you have this kind of perception. Well, people in the United States have this kind of perception that we, Japanese cars, it's hard to work on. There's no room under the hood. Well, look at all that room. There's a lot. This is basic as it gets, and plenty of room in there for activities. Look at that strut tower brace. It's got so much room. I mean, you could get sitting there and do some pull-ups on it. Okay, so this is if you don't know what this is, it kind of doesn't really look fast. They're kind of meant to be sleepers. This is a Buick Grand National. It's a 1987 Buick Grand National, and an odd flex, but they were built to compete with Corvettes, right? And they would advertise that they were faster than Corvettes, Camaros, Firebirds, Mustangs, which is okay. I get Mustangs, but all the other cars, Camaros, Firebirds, Corvettes, those are all GM cars. So it's an odd flex, I would say, to try to shit on your own company's other cars, especially the Halo car, the Corvette. But I mean, it ended up working out because these cars, Buick couldn't build enough of these. They could not build enough Grand Nationals to keep up with demand. They started out as in the early 80s with Buick T-types. So it's just, it was a turbo 6-cylinder and it wasn't intercooled. I think later on they had it to be a, especially when you got up to the mid 80s, they had the 3.8 liter in there with a turbocharger. But in 1987, this is when they added the intercooler and they were able to bump up the horsepower to 245, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. But back then, when you had V8s putting out 240 horsepower in the Corvette, that was a lot. This is, America was just getting out of that 70s era where nothing was really, that late 70s era where nothing was fast and everything just was kind of dogging around. But this is, like I said, turbocharged, intercooled. Later on, I think it was also in 87, they added the performance, like an extra performance option called the GNX. And this would be about, I think it would be about 275 horsepower, which, the Corvettes and Camaros wouldn't see for another probably 6 or 7 years in their V8s. So this was really, for the times, it was really something else. And I've actually raced one of these and driven one of these, and it's just, it'll surprise you. It does not look fast. It looks like an old gangster car, but it's very quick. And there was a certain point, I'm pretty sure they only made these in black. If anybody out there can find a picture of a white or a gray or a, I don't know, turquoise, one of these, any other color, let me know. But I have only seen these in black. Let's keep going. So this guy had it repainted, obviously black. When they added the GNX, though, it wasn't just Buick because they wanted to make sure that the production of the GNX didn't interfere with the production of the Grand National because it was such a specialized option. So they actually, ASC and McLaren came in to help facilitate the build on it. Sweet car. That is, look at that shine, though. Nice storage in the back, huh? So this is a 1970, not Dodge, it's a Plymouth Superbird. So it's based off of a Roadrunner. I know what you're thinking. Didn't Joe Dirt drive that car? Well, not quite. Joe Dirt, here, let me pause it real quick. Joe Dirt had a 1969 Charger Daytona, which still had that wing and still had a nose cone. It was actually, I believe the Charger Daytona was a couple inches shorter than the Roadrunner slash Superbird. And that nose cone was because they put these in professional racing. I think it was NASCAR. I'm pretty sure it was NASCAR to get Richard Petty to join the Plymouth team because he had just left and joined Ford. That's where you see in the movie Cars, where you have that like bright blue Superbird. That's based off of, that was the car that Richard Petty would drive, and they kind of made that into like a Cars character. But that's a little fun fact. Anyway, I always thought that it was kind of a weird thing that Joe Dirt would drive like a car that goes at auction for like $250,000, because they didn't make a lot of those. I think they only made like 500 or something of those Charger Daytonas with that big ass spoiler and the nose cone there. So, and to depict it like a piece of shit, I mean, you might as well have like, I don't know, it'd be cheaper to have like a shitty looking Lamborghini Gallardo. This one's got a 440 in it, and so not a Hemi, not a 426. I know, but look at that Roadrunner there. I mean, it's like, don't you miss those days when cars had cartoons on them? Man, that spoiler's a good like 3 feet tall too. Oh, and if you remember back a couple episodes, we had David on the show. He brought a couple of choice items in. I think one of them was a gun. The other one, he brought a spyglass, and he brought a piece of the Berlin Wall. Anyway, he came in and he thought that my Camaro here was the Joe Dirt car. So this is more similar to the Joe Dirt car. Obviously not the same one, but well, you get it. Anyway, shout out, David. Oh, here's a Land Rover. I think this was a 1967 or 68. I know that manual in there says 68, but the guy told me it was a 67. These were actually very utilitarian vehicles, and that was kind of what you went on safari with. That's kind of reminds me of. Well, this one's got a 250 cubic inch in it. And these are, like I said, very utilitarian. You're not going to see a whole lot of padding, a whole lot of cushions, a whole lot of nice carpet, interior stuff. This is built more like a Jeep than today's Land Rover. And that's kind of what they were back then, but they had interesting like seat configurations, right? So you can see there's the front seat, there's the back seat, and then you have the bench seats in the back, which that just screams safety to me. So this is a 1970 Charger, and you could tell it had the hideaway headlights in there. Those are a favorite of mine. And this is a factory convertible. So not only did they not have a lot of factory convertibles, they didn't have a lot of factory stick shift convertibles. If you see one in like in a car show, they'll usually be like an aftermarket convertible chop job. And so, obviously this is factory done, numbers matching. It's really, really rare. I mean, you'll see some of the inside pictures of this, and it's like, you might think, oh, well, it doesn't really have all the interior paneling or what have you. So, what a piece of shit. But this is, you won't see one of these very often, and it's wild to see. I think this one had a 440 in it. Again, not a Hemi, but still pretty badass. Oh, what's that? What is that? Humpty Dumpty? Nice thick 5-spoke rims. Another thing I want to say on this, the guy had a gear shift on here that had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I was like, these didn't come with factory 6 speeds. And he was like, oh yeah, well it has a T56 Magnum in it, but he made that gear shift to make it look, and it looked factory to me. So fooled me. Yeah. Hell of a car. Hell of a car. So this is a 1970 Jaguar XK. I think it was an XK 120. And I don't know about you, but when I look at these cars, I think just obviously James Bond, right? Like there's gonna be some machine guns that come out of those lights, and obviously a 350 engine. Ain't nothing wrong with a small block Chevy. It fits everywhere. It does everything you need it to do. And so the this guy was telling me that the straight six that came in here was a really long straight six, and so he didn't have much problems with shoehorning a V8 in there, which obviously it seems pretty compact. These needle nose cars always have some kind of issues. You always got to watch the temperature because there's not a lot of wind passing through there to cool it. But just to like, look at that kitty. Wow. Yeah, I mean, just look at that thing. It's, that 350 is a big improvement over what they used to have in them, which is it was a 3.4 liter straight six. And this car here, actually, not this year, but I think it was late 40s or early 50s. This is the first sports car that Jaguar made since, pre-World War II. And it was kind of a big deal. But you can tell, like, just look at the lines of this. This is kind of where, art meets machine. And I always say that cars are kind of, especially classic cars, are kind of half machine and half art. But this really, really helps drive the point home. Look at that thing. Hell of a car. And I'm really not into European cars. But, hell of a car. Look at that. Look at that window. Man, you'd have no problem crawling out of there if you accidentally drove it into a lake or like a fjord. Yeah. Man, beautiful car though. Nice red interior. Gotta love red interior. So here is an actual 5050. This is a CHP Mustang, and funny thing, in 1982, the CHP went to Ford and said that they needed something more nimble than their Crown Victorias. Obviously, not very nimble. And so they came up with these, and at first a couple hundred were purchased. They don't really have a whole lot of performance upgrades, but they do have. I think they had a skid plate. They had an automatic transmission cooler. They had, better hoses for the coolant. What else did they have? I think they also had, like a reinforced floor pan, better alternator, things like that. Just things to make it more reliable, so where it wouldn't, a full size spare, to make it so that it would be able to hold up on a chase or on the long run. But this, so they call this the SSP, the Special Service Package. Obviously only available to law enforcement. And you'll see there, so it's a stick. Can you imagine? Are there any cop cars today that are stick shift? And I'm not talking like, the ones that, you click, 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 and you can shift that way. I'm talking like, is there a clutch? I really don't think that there are. But let me know. Feel free to point it out if I'm wrong. I hardly ever am, but I always welcome it. There are around 15,000 of these produced, and there's a lot less now because, that's the nature of cars. But a lot of them have been, gobbled up by the collector's market. They have those, they have a lot of these events at, local raceways, or at least they used to when I was a kid. Well, not so much a kid, but they used to have these, top the cop races where you would bring your car to, let's say, Sears Point or Infineon or, whoever had the contract, I guess then. But you'd bring your car there, and a bunch of cops would be there. And some of them, they'd have these 50s. Other ones, they'd have like a Crown Vic or something, but it would be a cop car. Sometimes they brought the Camaros in, and you would get to race against the cops. And so kind of it was, meant to keep kids off of street racing, keep it at the track. And along those lines, there's also a couple of these that are, if you've ever had like the dare to keep kids off drugs thing come to your school, they usually will bring like a Mustang 5.0 with them. Fun little fact. Yeah, look at that. Government agencies all over the country ended up adopting these Mustangs in their lineup. I really did not realize that so many of these were stick shift. Apparently, a good more than half. And that's just what they told me, but got to go with it. It was a cop that told me, so what am I going to do? So this is a 1944 B-25 Mitchell. This one has the gunship configuration. You could see on the sides there's machine guns. On a more bomber configuration, you would not have those there. They use more of the interior for obviously carrying a payload, but you can see that there's that turret on the top. There's a turret on the front. There's a turret on the back. And I don't know if you remember in the movie Pearl Harbor, they used these are the planes that they used in the Doolittle campaign, which was kind of like a retaliation for Pearl Harbor. They launched 16 of these off of the USS Hornet aircraft carrier, and none of them made it back. That's kind of misleading because most of the people did make it back. I think there were 7 of them that got captured. Some of them died in one of the planes trying to bail out, and a couple of the other ones were killed by Japanese. But these guys, a lot of them did make it back. And if you remember in the movie, they tried to do whatever they could to reduce the weight so that these would be able to take off on the aircraft carrier. And so they actually removed the tail guns, and remember they replaced them with broomsticks. So luckily there was no Japanese fighters came and tested them on it. But it can't be overstated how this helped the morale in the United States after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It gave people kind of a second wind. We can do this. And on the other side, for Japan, they had just bombed the hell out of our Pacific fleet. And so, our main Pacific base in Pearl Harbor. And not long after, we were able to muster up this attack. And it wasn't, this was on Tokyo. This was on the capital. So it was a wild statement. Yeah, this is history. Look at that. Look at that. Somebody would have to get in the front there. Can you imagine? You got your leather helmet on. You got your goggles. Fit it up. Getting up there. All these turrets were electronically controlled. So, they could go pretty quick, but still pretty cramped in there. So this is a 1942, I think, P-51 Mustang. And easily my favorite plane. This is the reason we're all not speaking German or Japanese right now. So little history on these. The story of the P-51 kind of all started in Britain. Even though it's an American plane, but it's all started in Britain when Curtiss, the company that made the P-40 Kitty Hawks, they were great planes, and they wanted more of them. And Curtiss couldn't really keep up with demand. So Great Britain turned to an American company called North American. Go figure, huh? And they wanted them to basically reproduce the P-40 Kitty Hawks as kind of like a almost like a bootleg version, but obviously, North American had a bit of a reputation to uphold, so they decided to just build a whole new plane, and they ended up building the P-51. Now the P-40 had an Allison engine in it. It was a V12, and it could get up there pretty well. It was pretty maneuverable. I think it was a little bit more maneuverable than the P-51s, but quite a bit slower. And from what I hear, quite a bit less luxurious. So when North American took it over, they swapped that Allison out for the legendary supercharged Merlin V12. I think this was 1,600 horsepower, and the idea was you could, take off in Britain, bomb or have a mission to Berlin, and then return on its own power. And that's where those paper mache drop tanks come into play, because there's obviously filled with fuel on each side, and then they drop them. So somewhere in the ocean, or somebody's house, maybe, I don't know. They would drop them, and then they would have obviously less weight and less drag to be able to get back home. So they would use less fuel. But that was the idea, to be able to make a round trip from Great Britain to Berlin. And paper mache drop tanks, I guess that wouldn't really. I mean, if anything falls from like 10,000 feet on you, it's gonna hurt, even if it's made out of paper mache, I guess. But it probably just shattered and got reconstituted into the earth. They actually took the rivets out of these on the sides, and to increase the aerodynamics. And I can't stress enough like how iconic and legendary this plane is. If I were ever to be able to own one, well, for one, I would need more subscribers. Number two, this is basically, I would lock myself in a hangar and build this for years. This is, if you've never heard one of these fly, a piston plane in the air is an unreal sound. It's an aerial hot rod. That's the only way to describe it. And this is just, it's just an awesome machine. Yeah. Oh, somebody, so what you don't see in this video is somebody is laying down underneath the wing with a bloody head. So, there's sirens there. There's paramedics and cops there. You saw them from the CHP. They rushed over and, they drove their 1988 Ford Mustang over there. And now they're attending to this guy, to massive head wound Harry over here, who probably walked into the wing. He's still alive, and he was talking, but I think that's what happened. They serve beer, and this is a shiny airplane. It could easily have caught the sun, and tropical sun in Half Moon Bay, and blinded the hell out of this guy. And he must have been going at least 3 or 4 miles an hour to get that kind of head wound. So our prayers go out to him and his family, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Oh, so this here is a Cessna 180 Skymaster. And it's kind of a weird plane. It has two tails, and it has, obviously there's a horizontal stabilizer in between, but it has two propellers too. So there's only one in the front, right? You can see that one. And then there's one in the back. And that back one is just a little bit shorter than the one in the front, so that when it lands, because obviously when planes land, they kind of pitch up a little bit so that back is going to be a little closer to the ground when you hit. But so it's a little shorter. But this is considered a twin engine aircraft. And a lot of the times, planes will have, you've seen it, one engine on one wing, one engine on the other, or however like that. This is called, this configuration is called the centerline thrust configuration. That's right. So we learned a new word here on Caught in the Moment. Centerline thrust configuration. So one propeller is basically pulling, right, the air, and the other propeller, the one in the back, is switched up. It's basically pushing. So you got one engine pulling, one engine pushing. And the good thing about this kind of configuration is that there's not going to be a whole lot of, like, if you have a plane that has an engine on each wing and one engine goes out, you're going to have a little extra yaw, right? So your plane's going to want to turn towards the bad engine, and you're also going to have a little bit of a roll going on, right? So, but with this, obviously, if one engine cuts out, you're obviously going to lose some power, but you're not going to have any of those problems. And with these, they actually have a surprisingly good load capacity, useful load. And I think it's around 1,700 pounds. And the military actually will use some of these, and they will put rockets underneath those wings. Can you imagine that? But yeah, they're great for, little cargo runs, or they're just kind of a neat little plane, right? You don't really see this kind of configuration a lot. And those, you'll see that landing gear, that is actually, it doesn't look like it, but that is a retractable landing gear. Look at that thing. Can you imagine? It's really something to see those get retracted in there. It takes a long time too. So if you're ever flying these, you better make sure you're, clear of the trees before you start retracting that gear, because if you have to do a go around, you're going to have a bad time. So this is a Yakima 52. It's a Soviet trainer plane. You can see the evil red star, but it's a Soviet era training plane. And obviously there's two seats there. Standard radial engine, but look at it. It seems like you got a lot of room in that cockpit there, as opposed to like the gun bays in that Mitchell the B-25. So two people sit in there, but that room, I mean, it is very roomy inside. It's like it's almost like sitting in your living room without the mandatory picture of Joseph Stalin on the mantle. This particular plane is obviously a two-seater trainer. They usually have about 360 horsepower. There was another variation of this. You can tell this has tricycle gear, right? So it means that there's one wheel in the front, no wheels in the back, but there's two wheels on the wings. They have another version that has about 400 horsepower. That's the Yak 52 TW. And the TW stands for tail wheel. And so that obviously means that instead of that front wheel being in the front, it's going to be in the back. So, I don't know if anybody out here has ever flown a tail dragging plane like that, but they're real notoriously hard to see when you're taxiing, as you can imagine. It's crazy to see that, that red star. It just, and the camo planes, it's just so Cold War. Oh, look at that. So this is a real treat. 1968 GTO. I love the hideaway headlights. I'm a sucker for hideaway headlights. And this particular GTO has an LS motor swap. I believe that looks like an LS1 to me. Looks like LS1 coil packs, and yeah. I'm pretty sure it's an LS1. He's got a little bit of work done to it. But, these cars, they kind of started it all, right? They were kind of one of the first muscle cars. Not this particular model, but the ones in the early mid 60s, the ones with the horizontal headlights. kind of like the ones that you see in the movie Triple X. Those are the kinds of ones that started it all, right? Started muscle cars. I mean, you could say Mustang, maybe. You could say a couple other things too, but the GTO is really one of the ones that it was first on the scene as a muscle car. And so you could see, I mean, look at this. This is just a beautiful car. Look at that tack there. You know, you don't see those kind of things, those little novelty things. You don't see that very often anymore. But you'll notice here, I'll show you so these taillights, that's what tells you that it's a 68, because the first generation GTOs were obviously the ones I just talked about. I think they went from 64 to 67, and obviously this is 68. So 68 and 69 were the only 2 years that looked like this with those hideaway headlights. 70 and up, they kind of had those, the 4 headlights and kind of like a protruding nose a little bit. 69 was the only year that they offered the Judge, which is my favorite. But you'll see these headlights were only offered in 68. The 69 GTOs have the taillights have the taillights in between the bumper and the and the actual body there. So it's right split in between. These are obviously on the bumper. It's a 68. Told you might learn something, huh?
No.
Yeah, today GTOs are all gone. They had that brief stint with, shout out to Patrick for bringing his GTO by, but they had that brief stint in 2004 to 2006 where they had LS motors, just actually kind of like that one right there. But yeah, it was a hell of a time, hell of a show, and that's all I've got for you guys. So sorry, this is kind of a quick one. But this week, actually, if you want to catch me live, I will be at Autorama in Sacramento this week. And if you're lucky, Bumblebee might be there as well. All right. See you guys.